Thank you, Faith. Happy to be here again with Song Alive and the beautiful community here. Nice to see a lot of the same people that have been joining us throughout the week. So here we are, Friday, Wisdom Friday, and this is the culmination of the this kind of pithy teaching on the five spiritual powers. And I guess before we dive into wisdom, I'll give it just a very short review. We started with the spiritual power of faith, more specifically the three types of faith, which is really how all the powers are developed. If you don't have faith, the other powers just don't come online. That was followed by the spiritual power of energetic effort. This is kind of sequential. You know, you get faith. Let's make the right effort, a good health effort, a wholesome effort, a healthy effort, a helpful effort, a beneficial effort, instead of, hardcore effort that burns us out. And in effort, we spoke about that basic quality, characteristic of effort from Buddhist psychology, that effort in our practice is actually defined as having an enduring patience in the face of difficulties and suffering. Wow. That's what our effort is. Followed by this third spiritual power, which is none other than mindfulness. And that basic characteristic or quality of mindfulness, that it is sinking. Activate mindfulness, know what's arising in the present moment in ever refined ways. As you activate the mindfulness, the knowing will deepen incrementally. Third spiritual power. Yesterday was the fourth spiritual power of concentration. And we spoke about the qualities of concentration. I kind of gave the magnifying glass metaphor, and then the bow and arrow was kind of effort and concentration working together, and how our concentration, like all the spiritual powers, needs to be kind of accessed, awakened, and then developed, kind of strengthened, so that it's stable, that we can stably stay with an experience. It might be zooming out, it might be, really changing the power on the microscope and zooming into ever refined experience, but stably staying with that experience moment by moment by moment by moment by moment is concentration. And when that happens, what we'll begin to see as the eye of insight gradually, incrementally begins to open in the practice, we'll see deeper into the three universal characteristics of all phenomena, of all experience, any possible experience that you can be present for that's arising in this lifetime, in all lifetimes, are conditioned by anicca, dukkha, anatta, these three universal characteristics of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self. These are the Dhamma. Dhamma meaning ultimate reality. And today it's kind of the segue for today's topic on the spiritual power of wisdom. And wisdom applies two ways in our practice. First, it's awakening to a deeper truth, a deeper ultimate reality. That's the first wisdom, and that's always when we're there for it. Like the sign in Las Vegas, you must be present to win. When you're present for a deeper shift that's happening and you know it, it's a moment of wisdom awakening in our experience through the practice. The second application of wisdom is when we meet life, and life is challenging us. It's a moment of truth. Am I going to behave or react or go into old patterns that I know? Or am I going to organize my relationship to the world around the deeper truth that has awakened in my practice? That's the application of wisdom in the world. Very challenging practice. We all know that being mindful in the moment is a purification, has a purification quality. Everything, the experience of reality becomes very pure. Now take that experience of being mindful into challenging situations when all our bells and whistles and triggers are going off. That's the moment of truth. That's the application of wisdom. So what is wisdom? The power of wisdom. Well, like I said before, the term Dhamma or Dharma, sometimes it means teaching, sometimes it means the truth, sometimes it means community, sometimes it means the Buddha. There's so many different ways to define Dharma. It's kind of used in different ways, but the ultimate meaning, or the fundamental meaning of Dhamma, excuse me, is ultimate reality. You could also say universal principle. So, we are all, uh, because of our identification as the self, kind of, the quote unquote ego, we don't see the ultimate reality. And the identification of the self is not a bad thing. Ego is not a bad thing. In fact, ego could be a good thing. It's just problematic. I want to, hopefully we will all have healthy, happy, mature, healed, functional egos. But the ego, the sense of self, is a limited experience. It's a limited identity. Dhamma, ultimate reality, can be expressed in that limited identity, but it can't be contained in that limited identity. So all of our meditation practice, all of our spiritual practice for that matter, is practice that expands us beyond the boundaries of the self to some greater Dhamma. Ultimately, this Dhamma, the ultimate reality, is pointing to emptiness, our ability to see into, to shift the reference point to, and to express emptiness in our life is wisdom. I'll say it again. Wisdom is the ability to see into and express emptiness in our life. And I don't mean emptiness in a nihilistic, negativistic way, but emptiness in the absolutely most positivistic meaning of the word. It's an experience that, when had, you realize, oh, yeah, this is like the most positive thing in the world. So ultimately, wisdom is referring to emptiness and how we organize ourselves around emptiness. Secondarily, we could say that Dhamma, or wisdom, is the three universal characteristics of anicca, dukkha, and anatta, because these are universal. Applies to me, applied to him, applied to him and him and him. It applies to you, applies to Faith. I see her on my screen. It applies to everybody in your life. It applies to everybody in past lives. It applied to all of humanity. It's going to apply to future humanity, however long we manage to last. It applies to every single phenomena in the universe. Physical and non-physical phenomena is conditioned by anicca, dukkha, and anatta. In fact, our vipassana meditation, anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self, our vipassana meditation is the capacity to see into these experiences, are these characteristics of anicca, dukkha, and anatta. Three characteristics that arise, or I should say, that we can see as the eye of insight opens. So it happens at a very specific point in the developmental process where we start to recognize these three universal characteristics quite naturally. And gradually, with the practice, you'll see them more and more and more. And it's coming into contact, the repeated contemplation of impermanence, the repeated contemplation of unsatisfactoriness, the repeated contemplation of insubstantiality, non-self, emptiness. That's what gradually, incrementally, and eventually completely brings about a transformation in consciousness. That's the wisdom. Seeing into, having a direct experience of anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self, incrementally, gradually, compounds over time until it brings about a transformation in consciousness. And of course, that transformation of consciousness is a realization of nibbana, gaining the path of meditation, awakening, dare I say, enlightenment. And on that path towards awakening, on that path towards the realization of Nibbana, which is an experience that is awaiting everybody who is walking, practicing along this path. It's there. That realization purifies the mind in a way that completely transforms. It's like a revolution in consciousness, the realization of Nibbana, because at that point is the first point that we truly, deeply, through our own self practice, directly see into anatta, non-self. When consciousness and body completely disappear, it's not an experience that happens in consciousness. When mind and matter, consciousness and body completely disappear into this state of Nibbana, upon re-emerging, the mind is transformed. Now, there's there's levels of these transformation. There's levels of the awakening that won't go into the whole thing here, but that's the ultimate wisdom. You know, this 2,500-year-old tradition of Buddhism, why has it lasted for 2,500 years? It's not because of the dogma. It's not because of these ancient books that have been passed down from generation to generation to generation. That's one of the reasons it's survived. But it's this direct awakening that the Buddha had 2,500 years ago has been transmitted from human being to human being, from human consciousness to human consciousness in an unbroken chain. The realization of non-self has been transmitted from human being to human being in an unbroken chain for 2,500 years. This is a wisdom tradition. You can even say this is a living wisdom tradition. And wisdom, the power of wisdom, is that capacity to see into non-self. In order for that ultimate awakening to happen, the realization of Nibbana, the mind must stabilize in equanimity. It's a very high level meditative state. In order for the mind to, when what's happening in equanimity is just the experience of anicca, dukkha, and anatta. The sense of self is completely receded or faded or relaxed. And it's pure observation, effortless, selfless, and timeless. From that state, the mind can jump into Nibbana. In order to attain equanimity, you have to go through some type of dark night of the soul process. I'm sorry to say that it happens. The good news is it happens naturally. But in order for this process to be experienced and passed through, it is a wisdom process, by the way. You must first experience dissolution, see into the dissolution of phenomena, where experiences are dissolving, popping, shredding, all disappearing. In order to see that, you first have to see the rising and passing away, kind of reverse engineering wisdom, okay? You have to first see the rising and passing away. In order to see the rising and passing away, you must first see into process-oriented consciousness, where you can be with experience from the beginning through its life cycle to the very dissolution of that experience. Process-oriented consciousness, because here is the awakening in this process-oriented consciousness. That's the awakening of the seeing directly into impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self. Before you can establish process-oriented consciousness, you must first start to see the cause and effect of experience. How certain thoughts lead to other thoughts, as certain thoughts lead to physical experiences, as certain physical experiences may lead to another physical experience, how a physical experience can lead to a certain thought. Cause and effect. When you're seeing these connections in your experience, that's the eye of insight. That is insight. Before you can see that, first you must get to the point in your practice. And by the way, I'm quite sure everybody here is already here. You know, we're talking now kind of the beginning stages of the inner path of meditation. You must first see into the distinction of namarupa, mind and matter. And this all happens quite naturally with mindfulness-based meditation. But before one can make distinction between physicality and mentality in their practice, you must overcome the hindrances, those challenging mental states that pull us out of the practice constantly. They are the defense mechanisms of the ego that really want you to stop being mindful. So if the desires, the aversions, the sleepiness, and the restlessness and doubts are pulling you away from your practice, then the inner path cannot access concentration. You won't be able to access concentration to get into the inner path. So that's a whole nother teaching about the five hindrances. But the five hindrances are really the height of what's called in Buddhism avidya. And avidya simply means ignorance, unknowing. Two types of ignorance. There's simply not knowing. I'm here in my studio. There's a dojo actually over here. I don't know what's going on. There were some people in there practicing this morning. I don't know if they're there. So not knowing. That's the first type of ignorance. Simple not knowing. And the second type of ignorance is knowing in the wrong way. Oh no, there's a party, there's a parade, there's a troop of monkeys doing tricks over there. Projecting. That's also ignorance, knowing in the wrong way. Avidya, or so-called ignorance, which we all have more or less, is the opposite of wisdom. Avidya, seeing in the wrong way, or the false views, dominates the stream of consciousness at the beginning of a person's meditation practice. And as they practice, as wisdom starts to awaken, the so-called ignorance starts to wane, and then the wisdom will take over. And the reference point from a limited sense of self, in this process will gradually move over to wisdom, towards an awakened sense of self. How do we start this process? How do we sustain this process? How do we culminate through this process? It's very simple. Mindfulness. Mindfulness is the key. Mindfulness is our core practice. Yes, we need faith. Absolutely. Yes, we need energetic effort. Need it. Yes, we need concentration and wisdom. But mindfulness is the key. Mindfulness activates. Mindfulness sustains. Mindfulness purifies. So let's practice. So go ahead and settle into your posture. Activate the mind, activate the body. Just kind of open up your mindfulness. Start to know the experience. Just as a reference point, I will speak about the breath, and I'll speak about the breath specifically in the belly. But really, you're free to do whatever your method might be. You're also free to try my method or I shouldn't say my method, it's not mine. You're free to try this method if you like. So anchoring your mindfulness in the body, kind of coming home. Take a moment and check in with your feelings. If things are on the pleasant side, the unpleasant side, or the neutral side. Being mindful, allowing, accepting with no preference, letting things be exactly as they are. And shifting your attention to the mind and knowing your mental state. Your mind might be relaxed, it might be energized, it might be contracted, it might be open, it might be bright and shiny, it might be a little dull and lethargic. All these mental states are possible. Could be busy thinking, could be going to the past or reflecting on the regrets from past actions. Could be projecting into the future, planning. Could be thinking about the Dharma. Oh my God, wisdom, what a great topic. Let me think about this. All normal stuff. But as we differentiate our awareness and observe, we're dropping into mindful observation of the current experience. And shifting your attention to the breath in the belly, and knowing the precise physical sensations in the movement of the belly as you breathe in, knowing the precise physical sensations in the movement of the belly as you breathe out. The belly might be soft. There might be hardness. The breath might be smooth. It may be rough. The breath may be relaxed and loose, or it may be tight and restricted or constricted. The movement may be one continuous, smooth, silky movement, or the movement could be choppy. The movement could be in waves or in sections, or maybe even you notice vibrations in the movement of the breath. As you continue to observe the breath, notice, know if the breath is staying the same, or as you activate mindful observation of the breath, is the breath changing? It was short, now it's becoming longer. It was long, and now it's becoming shorter. It was smooth and fine before, but now it's rough and constricted. It was pleasant, and now it's becoming unpleasant. Or it was unpleasant, and now it's becoming more pleasant. If you're noticing changes in the breath, reflect, remind yourself that you are seeing the universal characteristic of anicca. If the one solid breath that you've been observing from beginning through the middle to the end, and you're observing if there's a pause or no pause, and you're observing the very moment of the beginning of the next breath, through the middle to the end, pause or no pause, when you're observing that process, if you start to see fluctuations, waves, sections in the movement, if that solid breath is beginning to break apart, not one experience, but several little experiences, you are seeing the universal characteristic of anicca. The eye of insight is opening. Your mindfulness is sinking in to the deeper nature of your experience. If you're not seeing it, that's totally fine. Don't try to see it because I'm suggesting it. Please, that's not the intention here. Just see what is there. And as you observe the movement and characteristics of the breath, know those characteristics and notice what happens to them. Should the breath or the breathing process start to become unsatisfactory, laborious, tight, unpleasant, constricted, know that you are seeing the universal characteristic of dukkha, that you are seeing insight. The mistake would be to try to regulate away the unpleasant experience. In our daily life, that is completely a healthy thing to do. In our vipassana meditation, we want to create a container of mindfulness and stay with the experience, especially unpleasant experiences, to develop a tolerance towards dukkha. Dukkha is perhaps the greatest teacher, and it is the first noble truth. Again, I am not suggesting you should be experiencing dukkha. I'm not suggesting you go looking for dukkha. Just observing the breath. Should it start to become unsatisfactory, remind yourself, reflect, this is the insight, seeing into the universal characteristic of unsatisfactoriness. Whatever arises in the course of your practice, your mindfulness based practice, is your path. Nothing is wrong. Nothing that arises is wrong. It is the forward leading path. And should you manage to have the capacity, the ability to counterintuitively stay with unsatisfactoriness with precise mindful observation, you may find that poof, suddenly there's a shift and it all lets go. That the breath suddenly becomes easy. The breath is suddenly effortless. The breath may be experienced as long, endless expansion, or it may be very slight and imperceptible. The sense of agency, the sense of self is completely relaxed. The times of past and future also relax, and you're able to just be in the present moment. What was previously unpleasant in the dukkha is now suddenly quite a pleasant experience. It's not pleasant because it's fun and it feels good. It's pleasant because of the absence of dukkha in this phase. As a person's practice matures, this will be more and more the experience. But it can be some time where we must go through anicca, we must go through dukkha, and we must go through anatta. These three universal characteristics are always cycling around. Should you find yourself in the anatta phase, reflect, this is emptiness. And because it tends to be effortless, really be present and allow it to happen. This is the experience of wisdom, seeing into the impermanent nature, the unsatisfying nature, or the empty nature. This is a direct experience of wisdom, and it will gradually arise incrementally with each breath and each moment, moment by moment, breath by breath. Feeling the body, bring your mindfulness back to the body. Feeling the breath, bring your mindfulness back to the breath. Being mindful of your mental state and know the mental state. Being mindful of the space on the inside. And as you slowly come out of the meditation and open your eyes, being mindful of the space on the outside and around you. Okay, so we have a little time for questions or sharing. But before we go into the questions, wisdom traditions are a precious thing. They're part of a sacred human tradition. And Sangha Live is definitely one of these containers for a sacred wisdom condition. And as Faith was mentioning before, there's a team that makes this happen. There's a platform with platform costs that makes it happen. And there's a beautiful community of teachers that are offering these sacred practices. And there are basic operating costs. So that's why Sangha Live, I guess, chose to work, or for whatever reason Sangha Rise chose it, but they chose to work with the donation method on these daily practices. So if you value this practice, if you value this container, if you value this community, and if you value the support and nourishment you get from this community, then consider offering dana. Faith will post a link. And remember, we support the Dharma. The Dharma supports us. The Dharma supports us. We support the Dharma. And the greatest form of dana, is taking whatever wisdom has awakened in you and sharing that with others around you. Okay. Yeah, so we have about 12 minutes for any questions that may come up. If somebody wants to come on, we've invited people to come on the whole week, and I think Clive's the only one that's taken us up on it. Hey, Danny, morning from Tel Aviv. Good morning, Danny. Good morning from Tel Aviv. We have a nice raining morning on the weekend of Pride. Wash all that dust out of the air. Anyways, as I was saying, a key part of our practice is something called Dharma discussion. And Dharma discussion is where you kind of take your ideas, your understanding, your experience of the Dharma, and you place that, you put that in relationship with the teachings, the principles. Often this is done through friends or through teachers, but it is an important part of the practice. So any questions you have is part of that tradition. Hey, Clive. Clive's got a question here. From time to time this week, I have heard you say something like, Burma. What is this? What is Burma? Burma is the previous name of a country in Southeast Asia. Today they call it Myanmar. It was a British colony, Burmese, and Burma, if this is correct, what I was saying, I could have been saying Dharma, I could have been saying something else, but Burma is a former English colony. And It's one of the five traditional early Buddhist countries. It's Buddhist culture primarily. 90% of the population is Buddhist, like in Thailand. And the Burmese tradition of meditation tends to focus. There's lots of different schools, meditation traditions. I come from the Mahasi tradition, which is a Burmese method. Um, but the Burmese traditions tend to focus more on Abhidhamma, Buddhist psychology, whereas the Thai tradition, this is a generalization, the Thai traditions tend to focus more on suttas, the teachings of the Buddha, the early teachings of the Buddha. So teaching meditation through what the Buddha taught. The Burmese also do that, but they kind of focus on more the phenomenological approach, which is Abhidhamma, the Buddhist psychology or the sublime Dhamma. Mariavi, hi Mariavi, asks, can you please talk a bit about the dark night of the soul? I think I'm there. Yeah, there's little dark nights and there's big dark nights and then there's the great dark night of the soul. And basically, it's when our limited sense of self, the ego, let's say, again, not making the ego a bad thing, but when our ego is no longer, the truth of our ego and the truth of reality are no longer in coherence. They're just so dissonant that we suffer tremendously from it, and it can be quite hard to go through. Now, this can be an insight in meditation where the ego is going through profound dissolution, and it just shocks you. Or this could just be an experience that we're going through in life, and as we move from one identity in life or to another identity. And just think of a baby being born, those last few weeks, certainly days, certainly hours, it's getting really crowded in there and it's just not comfortable anymore. And then the contractions come and it's like, oh my God, for the baby, that must be horrible. Those contractions are squeezing it. It wants to grow and it's getting squeezed and pushed out of that comfort zone, mommy's beautiful belly. And oh, it's so nice. And it's getting pushed out. And that is growing pains. So just a really, really kind of maybe even simplistic way to say it, Mariavi, this is it's growing pains of the self. The dark night of the soul is something that acceptance is the way forward. Acceptance and mindfulness, knowing what's there. And what will happen is, we'll kick and scream going into it. When we get there, we can be terrified of it. We can either even kind of wallow in depression. And I say that because that's kind of what we do. We wallow in depression. And if we're not careful, we can get stuck there. So that's why it just reminds you of acceptance, acceptance, acceptance. The recognition and the acceptance of going into these hard periods is what took us there. Mindfulness took us there. Mindfulness will take us through, and mindfulness will take us out to where we have a greater maturity, a greater acceptance, and we are a more whole person because we have that experience of what it's like to go through an ego death, basically. Okay, that was short, so I hope that was helpful. And bless you. Take care of yourself. Yeah. Take care of yourself and trust the process. And if you need external support, reach out to somebody who can help you with that. Lots more questions. 2 more questions here. Let's see. Is that okay? Somebody. I'll just read the question. In my practice, I spend so much time skittering around. Yeah, sure. Where'd you go? In my practice, I spend so much time skittering around on the outside of single point of focus. Not a problem. Not a problem. Sorry. Yeah, and don't seem to have reached the deeper parts of what you are talking about. Well, yeah, that's everybody's like that. I've been practicing for around 14 years, but wondering if I'm simply sitting with the skittering and not working hard enough to get deeper. I sort of accept what's happening. Well, if you've been practicing for 14 years, and Danny Sykes has his hand. Let's open the mic for Danny. Sorry, Danny. I just now noticed you. Give me 1 second. I'll answer this question. If you've been practicing for 14 years, do not underestimate the amount of momentum you've developed. It's concentration, mindfulness is definitely developed. I suppose there's so many different ways to look at it. We could go back and I mean, we'd have to really talk about it. But first, be patient with the process, fully accept what's there, and see if you can stabilize your concentration first with the skittering, because that's what's arising. And then should the skittering start to change, know how it's changing. Okay, that's the process. And skittering is simply a hindrance. I don't say simply in a to belittle it. It's a big deal, these hindrances, but it's a hindrance. And being patient with the hindrances, working with them skillfully instead of indulging them, instead of resisting them, and instead of denying them. Don't indulge, or be mindful if there's an indulgence, be mindful if there's resistance, and be mindful if there's denial, because that's also normal stuff that comes up. And then just be patient, and I wish you the best of luck. Okay, let's go to Danny, because he had his hand up for a while. Hi, Danny. Nice to meet you. Is that Danny? Oh, no, I can't hear you. No, it's very faint. I can kind of hear you. Very faint. Very, very faint. I hear some noise on your mic, but I don't hear your voice very well.
Can you hear me now?
There you go. Yeah.
Hear me now?
No. Yes.
Hi. Do you hear me?
Hi, Danny. Yes. Go ahead, Danny.
Danny, we hear you well.
Try something else.
No, you're good.
I think maybe he can't hear you, Miles.
All right, so I'm gonna go back to the questions.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Okay, why don't you mute him, Faith, and we're just going to go on to the next.
I don't hear you.
Okay, so we'll go to the next question. Denny wrote, he said, you spoke of two types of ignorance. Great. Please explain a bit more the second type, which I'm not fully understand. It struck me that a huge part of our daily lives are in ignorance and awareness of that daily life. Major doorway. Okay, two types of ignorance is simple not knowing. Again, there's a dojo on the other side of this wall. This is my studio. I don't know what's going on. There could be a clown over there, and I just don't know it. I have to open the door and go there. Oh, I didn't know you were here. That's simple not knowing. Simple not knowing in the Dharma is not knowing that there's these three universal characteristics, not knowing that there's something called Nibbana, just simple not knowing. Or there's knowing in the wrong way. And that would be me imagining, oh my God, the clowns are over there and they've got monkeys and I'm so excited about it. And I'm Vince and I'm going to give a whole teaching on how the clowns and the monkeys in my other room. That's kind of delusion. That's the second type of ignorance. And in our meditation practice, sometimes we can delude ourselves. We can imagine, oh my God, well, it's very common when people have peak experiences that they translate that as enlightenment. Or like I'll give another example for Clive. The other day, he was talking about an experience that he was having where he opened up, things expanded. He used the term interbeing. Great term. I have such similar experience. But somebody who has never really had that experience can use that concept, interbeing, but be deluded. I'm not suggesting Clive is at all. In fact, I doubt that he is. I could tell from his description. So concepts, living through concepts is one form of delusion. In our meditation practice, the concepts systematically drop. Concepts are not problematic. We do use them. But direct experience, bare experience is what we're aiming for in our meditation practice. And if there's skitteriness of the mind, like somebody mentioned before, that's the direct experience. I'm not going to, I might translate that as, no, my mind is really sharp and I'm fast and I'm intelligent and okay, maybe yes, maybe no. Let's look deeper. So the two types of ignorance are simple not knowing, number one, and the second one is knowing things in the wrong way, misunderstanding them or misinterpreting them or deluding them. Okay. Wow, there's two more questions, but I'm afraid we're out of time. Patricia says, joy and gratitude have been fruit of concentration today, primarily for your transformation of the fifth by spiritual powers. Faith, thank you. That's beautiful. Can you discuss having contact with people who are misguided? No time for that. I would love to, but there's just no time. So I think we're going to finish off here. Lovely Sangha. Thank you all for joining me today. For those who've been with me through other days of the week, thank you. For those who've been with me all 5 days, that's beautiful. Thank you for joining. I hope that this week of practices brought some benefit to you in your practice. Remember, I think it's July 22nd. I'll be offering a day of practice, and the day of practice is going to be looking directly at the 3 universal characteristics. I'll send the information for that soon. In the meantime, I want to wish you all a great day of practice, and may your practice of these 5 spiritual powers, and may the cultivation of these 5 spiritual powers continuously ground you in your practice, continuously, gradually, and greatly awaken wisdom in your practice, and may that become expressed in your life, and may it lead you forward forever and always forward on your path of practice. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Faith, and thank you, Sangha Live.